I sometimes worry that I'm like alienated in some ways because it all happened when I was so young, and like literally from the age of 12 I've been like set for life, and that's like very different to how I was like before that age.
Is there a mixture of emotions surrounding that, like being set for life at 12 as you grow up? Now, I've sat here with a couple of guests who come from like a council estate or grew up in very difficult situations, and they often express this kind of, I remember Jackmate doing it, express this kind of almost, guilt's a bit of an interesting word, but like, why did I remember Jack saying to me, I can make thousands and thousands of pounds from just making YouTube videos. And I watched my dad not make the same amount of money in like a year or whatever. And I could just make it from one YouTube video. And he would go back and he'd meet someone. I remember him saying he met someone in a pub that was like a cancer doctor, and he's making more than them, just sat at home. He always expresses this kind of like, I don't know, guilt or injustice. Have you ever felt that?
Definitely. Like, just, yeah, real, like the guilt around like allowing yourself to have nice things or do nice things because you're like able to. Like I felt like when I was a kid, everything stopped happening and all my problems were going to go away. And then like all my problems didn't go away. And then I was set for life when I was 12 and I thought all my problems are going to go away. And I was like, well, it's not like that unless all of my friends and family are that way too. Because like, how are we all supposed to like be okay if only one person is okay? And, you know, you give people what you can, but you don't see the pain, take the pain away for another person, doesn't take the pain away for yourself. Like, and then you realize that like actually life is something else entirely. And like the biggest problem that a lot of people face is making money and like making enough money to live and like support their family. But being able to do those things isn't in it like the only thing that like makes you happy. Like when you take that problem away, there's sometimes still a very hard discussion that you have to have with yourself where it's like like a fundamental chat where you have to tell yourself that, well, I don't know, there's a lot of things. I don't want to take away from the fact that like having money enables you to like even be able to comprehend or like
another set of problems.
Yeah. Like I know that in itself is like an incredibly privileged position to be in. But like money won't take the pain away. It will take like the stacking bills or, you know, or the fear of like losing your house, you know.
It doesn't undo trauma. You can't buy, you know, trauma away.
Yeah.
Even if you can keep the heat on and the electricity and feed yourself, there's still for many people another level of trauma which money can't seem to solve for directly. The post Game of Thrones, you know, I remember sitting here with one of the guys from One Direction, Liam Payne, and he talked about how post One Direction, he has this identity, which is he is a part of a boy band, and then leaving that, it can be quite troublesome psychologically. And I think he talked about the same thing, which is like, who am I? Where do I belong? How do I then go and find out who that person is and start creating for that, and not just being this character, this, you know, member of a boy band that the world knows me for. Did you ever feel that post Game of Thrones?
Yeah, in a way, but I felt like I had got to a point already within being in the show that I was like, oh, I feel like I'm like cosplaying as this like person I've created, and I don't think that this really is who I am. So sort of leaving the show meant that I could leave that as well. You know, I kind of like wanted to like say the right thing and do the right thing and like act like I had everything figured out and like be a good role model, and you know, which is all very good things to want, but it's like it wasn't like very authentic. It was like just like trying to be liked, I guess, right? And then you're like, oh, I actually, you know, I don't want to do things that make people like happy, because like I want to do things that make me happy, and like I want to, represent myself the way that makes me feel most comfortable, and not like just the way that's most like palatable or like whatever. And so I'd already got to the point where I was like, oh, this isn't really me. And I'm like desperate for something to just like drastically change so as I can like cut from that. And that's sort of what happened when the show ended. Then also sort of sped up by the pandemic and being like in like solitary. So I was kind of like very ready for that. And it wasn't like, oh, who am I? I was kind of like, ooh, who could I be?
21, 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How are those years for you? So this is like around the time the show is concluding. I think it concluded when you were 22?
Yes, when it came out, yeah. I just didn't really go out a lot, and I just felt quite... I don't know. It was just like it was like the most successful it was ever going to be, and it was like most people would like recognize you on the street, and like I had just got so like rehearsed at like, oh, thank you, that's so nice, and I just like everything I said and felt and did, it was just like, oh, none of this is like, I felt like very going through the motions of life, where it was like, yeah.
Acting again.
Yeah. It wasn't the hardest, like most awful and traumatic, like, oh, it was like terrible. It wasn't. It was fine. But I just like, I knew that something better was coming. At
that age though, 20 years old, how do you feel about yourself?
Oh, I didn't really have a very like good opinion of like myself and my self-image. I forget that. I really didn't like myself that much. I don't know. I just told myself that I was like awful and disgusting and like unattractive and unkind and like just like not a good person and like unlikable. I just told myself that like every single day. And so in ways I sort of became like that because you just like beat yourself into like a mess, Mind is quite powerful in that way.
Yeah, really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Fern talks to me about this a lot. I know you did her podcast, right?
Yeah. I listened to her chatting about this on your podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the origin of that self story, like where it originates from? Obviously, you have a thread that most people don't have, which is the world is giving feedback on you every day now because you're in the press and you're a young woman, and we know that can be a pretty vicious thing. But do you know the origin of those self stories?
I feel like I felt self-conscious like even before all of that. So it definitely before like fame, and so it definitely was enhanced by that. But I think it came a lot earlier. And I'm actually still trying to figure this out, like at the moment with my therapist. We're trying to really trace that back. And a lot of this a lot of the discovery has come through meditation. I've been doing a lot of transcendental meditation. And like there's something about going into that state that like brings up like a little ticket, and I go, like that's, but I haven't quite figured out the answer to this one yet, or where it like initially stems from. But I've definitely felt like embarrassed of myself or ashamed or like, thought, oh, like I'd be playing at a kid's house and thinking like their parent thinks that I'm like awful. I'm like the child that all parents don't want their kids to hang out with. Like I've just felt this way about myself. And I was like, I wasn't trying to get them to do like naughty things or anything. I just was like a kid that was just like, but I thought, I'm like I'd go to someone's house and I'd like my shoes, like maybe they're not in the right place and I haven't put my bag in there, and this parent is gonna like not like me or like whatever. I've like felt that like self-awareness to that degree where I've like critiqued and like beat myself up like since I was very, very small. Yeah. I don't know where it comes from yet. I'll let you know.
Well, the question I naturally ask is when was the first time someone told you those? I mean, even the example of like, oh God, have I put my shoes in the wrong place? What happens if they're in the wrong place? And What's the consequence of my shoes being in the wrong place? Because me growing up, if my shoes were in the wrong place, there's not really a consequence for that.
No.
You know?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I have some theories on it. But I don't know. It doesn't concern just me, so I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Just like I think that I've like I've witnessed like people just feeling like just them existing in one spot is like them just taking up too much room in this world. And I think that I've like just taken on a piece of that, where like just living and breathing, like you're too much and like you're irritating. So, but it's not true. And if anyone ever feels like that, it's not true.
Because we can know these things are objectively not true. But this is the thing that really fascinates me is like, how can we in one hand know that something is not true, yet seemingly we're not able to completely eradicate that story? Because I used to think, definitely used to believe before doing this podcast, that these stories we believe, this evidence we have, whether it's wrong, true or false about ourselves, I used to believe that there was some way of just like erasing it. And you do this, you tap your head, you wiggle your stomach like that, and then it's gone. You go to therapy twice, you do this, you spin around, and it's gone. Mm-hmm. But no matter, like, I don't think I've ever met a guest on this podcast that has gone through some kind of traumatic early experience in their life and has ever erased it. Ever. People will say they've built new evidence which counteracts it so that the new evidence makes the decisions in their life, but it's still there. And traumatic events can make it flare up. I'm I consider myself to be one of those people where I've got to be very aware of my triggers because, they might take over the control room once in a while and start calling the shots. So
I feel like, just like experiencing it all in the moment is interesting, and like not sort of like predicting that there's like an end to it, but you go like, I have been in this situation before, and like last time I wasn't aware of these triggers, and now I see exactly what wants to happen, and I'm not gonna do it. And like there's the piece of your brain that's like actively making those decisions and going, but then there's the like, I don't know, consciousness or like, the spirit that then observes it and goes, like what happens next? Like you're playing a board game, right? And like something happens and then like you're sort of above it and you go, where will this go next? And every time that your brain doesn't manage to do that, it's not like going straight back to that place, that point, even though like that's the way your body's reacting. It's like you're still at this point in the journey of life, and this is how you're experiencing it in this moment. And like it's not like, oh, you failed at like healing, because like there's no end to it. It's just, in this moment, what can you learn? Your brain has gone back there, even though like previously you've managed to avoid this, or you've managed to sort of like avoid a trigger, or like rewire something. But it hasn't this time. So it's like, what can we learn from looking at it this time? How do I see it differently to a time when I would have like done this before? And it keeps going. Like every minute is like an opportunity to like see where it will go next. And it will never be erased, because like it's a vital part of who you are. And like without it, like you would be an entirely different person.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.